Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, and welcome to the Proactive Caregiving Podcast. As a CPA with over 20 years as an industry accountant, Jessica stepped away from the corporate world to become a full-time caregiver for her mother. Having learned invaluable lessons along the way, she is now here to share those with you and to invite you to join her on this caregiver's journey. Here is your host, Jessica Cannon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I wanted to share something that has helped me to step aside and take a different look within my caregiving journey and beyond. And so I wanted this to be an opportunity to share something very valuable with you. As a caregiver, I often speak about the stressful environments that I care within, but started to recognize that others aren't responding and stressing the same way I am or from the same scenarios. So it started to get me thinking, have you ever thought about what type of a caregiver you are? And I'm not necessarily referring to the technical type, like the family caregiver or the professional, independent, the private, the informal, or volunteer. I'm talking more so of the type of caregiver and the type of person, what motivates us personally. So you may have heard about this, because I know I didn't until I started to reach my own spiritual discovery journey in this process. But I came across what is called an Enneagram. And today I've asked Jackie Rylander to be on with me because she definitely can speak to this more clearly than I can. Jackie is a lifelong member of Riverbend Church. She is a born and raised Austinite. She's a wife, mother of 2 boys, and a criminal defense attorney. She also lectures at the University of Texas, and she teaches about God's Word. For 10 years, she served as a prosecuting attorney in Williamson County, but since then she stepped away as the primary caretaker of her toddler and infant, and is even starting her own defense practice. But as interesting as that sounds, she will go in further into this Enneagram, and you'll believe what an exciting, enlightening tool this can be. Thank you for coming on with me today, Jackie. How's it going?
Thank you so much. It's a great day.
So, before I ask you how you came across this, can we pretty much explain to everybody what the Enneagram is?
Yes, the Enneagram is a personality assessment and also a spiritual tool to understand what drives you, what motivates you, who you are, why you think the way you do, why you say the things that you do, and why you do the things that you do. So the underlying reasons or motivations for who you are. So it goes into your identity, into your spirituality, and it really helps you with communication between people, within your relationship, because you understand that there are 9 typologies of the Enneagram, and the world is divided into those 9, and not everybody is like you. So you have a deeper empathy from that.
And it's very important to come from that place of empathy. And it's something that's helpful. I mean, when you think about what's going on in the world today, if we would be able to stop and think why people are reacting the way they are, not just historically, but their personality types certainly play into that, I would think.
Absolutely.
So how far back does this Enneagram personality typing go? Where does it come from?
So it's been popularized since the 1950s. A lot of behavioral and social science research has gone into it of late. However, it actually dates back to the 4th century to a monk, and it's been developed since that time. And there are a lot of recommendations I have for resources if you want to learn more about it and how to assess yourself. But certainly you can go to the Enneagram Institute online for lots of background information. And the book called The Road Back to You is a very popular read right now that explains kind of what the Enneagram is and what number you likely could be. A more in-depth read would be Richard Rohr's Enneagram book as well. He was kind of one of the originals in the last 50 years to bring it back.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually have that book and I've been reading it I'm engrossed in it right now, The Road Back to You. And this is one of the things that before I wouldn't have picked up this book because from my background and my exposure in the corporate world, a lot of times they have you take the Myers-Briggs test, which is more of that profiling for the strengths and weaknesses and your opportunities and threats for you to assess that way. And I looked at this information before and I thought, oh, it's another one of those profiling things. And I definitely dismissed this book way too soon because once I've gotten into it, it really has given me, it's made me think back to times when I've worked with other professionals and even people personally now in my caregiving journey. Like, it is a very interesting way to look at things.
I would definitely say it's very helpful. Prior to that, I would say if you want to know a little bit about your number, what you could be on the Enneagram, go to enneagramtest.net because this is going to be an initial testing to kind of get you into it to see if you want to know more about who you are, your true self. And when you take that test, you don't want to be overly analytical. You want to answer questions spontaneously, what's been true most of your life. You don't want to try to jinx it. Just be very honest. Everything about the Enneagram is very self-introspective. You're looking internally, an honest interrogation of who you are and the depth of your identity, the good, the bad, the shadow and the light. And when you take the test and even when you read further, just being very honest with, yes, this is true of me most of my life.
Right. And that's where I looked through it. And at first I started to say, I think I'm a little bit of an 8 with a 9 wing. And then I read even further. I was like, nope, I'm definitely a 1 with a 9 wing. And then I continued to read through and I thought, well, maybe I'm a little bit of this one and maybe I'm a little bit of that one. And so I can definitely see how we have a lot of these personalities that I guess as situations and scenarios happen in our life that may kind of shadow one or the other, but it's not your individual type.
I would say, first we probably should introduce everybody to the fact that there are these 9 personality types or typologies, and they really revolve around what drives you. So why don't we kind of give some of the basic information about that and
Definitely.
The desires of the 9 types. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So when you take the test and read about the Enneagram, you're going to see the 9 typologies that explain human motivations and what motivates you. So 1s are perfectionists, and they're motivated by the desire to live the right way and improve the world. It sounds like you're number 1. That's okay, which is wonderful. Number 2s are helpers. They have a need to be loved and needed, and they express that through helping others. They actually are called caregivers as well on the Enneagram. So many people in the audience could relate to the number 2 typology. Number 3s are performers. They're motivated by a need to be successful and goal-oriented, or at least appear to be, and are very productive members of society. I'm a 3, and the number most popular in America is a 3. 4s are romantics. They have this desire to be understood, often very artistic and creative. 5s are investigators, motivated by a need to gain knowledge and really love researching and going into detail. 6s are loyalists, and these are the most popular in the world. They are motivated by a fear and need for security, and they tend to be the worst case scenario thinkers. 7s are enthusiasts, and they have this need to be stimulated all the time, have positive experiences, and very fun and spontaneous, often have very good senses of humor. 8s are challengers. They're motivated by a need to be strong and avoid appearing weak or vulnerable. And 9s are peacemakers, and they're motivated by a need to keep the peace, merge with others, and avoid conflict. And they're very harmonious people. So as I'm talking, you might be thinking, what's my number and relating, but that's just kind of your basic information. Mm-hmm. The beauty of the Enneagram is it has so many layers and depths. And so you can learn more about who you are in terms of your strengths of your number and your true self, and then also who you are with your weaknesses. And there's these deadly sins associated with your number as well. So you see the depth of, who you were created to be. And then, as Jessica mentioned, there are wings and connecting lines. And wings would be the side numbers that you are influenced by. So nobody is a pure number. You're on a spectrum. And connecting lines would be who you are, how you behave essentially when you are fragmented and stressed out, like in a pandemic. It's definitely changing our normal, or who you are when you are actually operating in your whole true self, very spiritually connected and, very integrated and whole. So it gives you a lot of information as you go into the Enneagram about, your motivation and your typology.
And that's what I liked about this, is because it's about the personality types, the motivation, and it's not directed in a male-female sense. It's very across the board.
That's right. And it also does not fall on extrovert-introvert lines like some personality tests.
Oh, right.
You can be an introverted or extroverted 3. My father is definitely more introverted, and I'm more extroverted 3, but we're both 3s. And I'm actually seeing it come across in my son, too. So you can begin to want to diagnose your friends and family, but I would also encourage them to read and take a test and learn about it themselves. Some people can do it in a day like me, and other people take 6 months to decide what number they are.
Right. It's definitely took me several weeks reading through it and kind of seeing what felt comfortable and what made sense to me, because I was jumping from several different ones till I realized, okay, over the span of my life, and so then it kind of all made sense.
And remember, personality is formed, a lot when we're young.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the mask that we wear, right? These coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms that we develop, and how we respond to the world around us. And it tends to be solidified by our 20s. So if you are older, you can kind of think back to what was I really like in my 20s, what really drove me, and that can kind of give you an indication of what number you could be if you're having trouble deciding that number. And you remember, it goes back to motivation. So for an example, when I feed my baby, I am very driven as a 3 to finish the task. And, it's a goal of mine to feed my baby 3-4 times a day. And I feel accomplished because he can be kind of a difficult eater. But my mom, who's a 2, when she feeds my baby, she is very motivated by the need to meet the need, to want to help him. And, she tends to be a little more patient as his caregiver as well. And so, we're both doing the same action of feeding the baby, but we're motivated differently. And it comes across in how we express ourselves as well. And my mom was always trying to feed my baby more than probably I would, because I want to get it done as a 3. I've come to have a lot more patience with her and understanding that she really is living in her typology. And I have to let her be the 2 that she is. Mm. So it really comes down to what drives us and motivates us.
And that's why I think this is interesting, especially for caregivers, is because we can't just assume that everybody out there that is a caregiver, and there's millions for all sorts of reasons from all walks of life, that not everybody is a number 2. And number 2
right.
being the helper or the caretaker, and what they're motivated in. I mean, they may have come into this role because there was a death in the family, or for their spouses for that matter, or the special needs children. It's just, it doesn't mean that because you're a caregiver, you're specifically a number 2. You definitely want to. I came into this wanting to do the best I could, and being the 1 personality type, everything needed to be perfect to me. It wasn't just a matter of checking a box, which I am that list maker. Like, I like to make the list and kind of do that brain dump and check off the list as I go in and feel that sense of accomplishment. But it's not that I'm checking off the list, it's how I go about checking off the list. And so how I chose to care for my mother, everything and every way I approached it had to be perfect. But that's where I started to notice the difference between the healthy side and the not so healthy side, because let's just, I can admit it, hi, my name is Jessica. I'm a recovering perfectionist. There's not many things in life that are perfect. I can only think of one creator that is perfect, and everything else is it just is what it is.
Right. And as you kind of lean into who you were truly made to be in God, you actually recognize that what's more important is not perfectionism, but living a real life of service and integrity, where you're more balanced and responsible and able to forgive some of that imperfection.
Exactly. And so as we go through this and we learn a little bit more, I mean, some people do come back and say, well, that's just how I am. I don't know. It's not a type. That's just how I am. But would it be so important or beneficial for us to figure out that hardwiring?
So, this is like where you start. This is very much inside yourself who you are, but you can become a better version of yourself or a worse version of yourself as you grow in your spirituality, as you grow in your self-awareness and your introspection and your desire to become the best version of you. The Enneagram is going to give you insight into taking that basic, number and basic desire motivation. How can that be transformed and grown into the best version of yourself? So, you're going to learn a lot about your strengths there and your weaknesses and how you lean more into your strengths to become the truest version of yourself. And then how you kind of chip away at the false part of you. For me, it's been very enlightening as a 3. I'm actually an attorney, and so I love to speak the truth. So when I learned that my weakness is deception, I thought that was strange. Like, I think of myself as a very honest person. How could that be my, Achilles heel? And I was looking into that, and it began to make sense. What they mean by that in the Enneagram is I can value appearance and kind of a crowd-pleasing image and approval of others and trying to project this image of I've got it all together, kind of fooling myself,
right? Not
so much others, but me. And so recognizing that I have a tendency to want to accomplish things so that I appear a certain way, I can, through prayer and growth, learn how to actually be more authentic and realize that my image, who I'm created to be, is not tied to what I am accomplishing and self-actualizing, but it actually is tied to me being a child of God, me learning more about my faith, about how I'm created to rise to challenges and solve problems for the common good through service and living for Christ and for loving others instead of living for self and trying to actualize my own version of myself. So it's been really revealing for me,
Me too.
to learn about my strengths and my weaknesses.
Definitely. I can agree with that because before I learned about this personality type and my own personal, I kept thinking in my early years of my career, I was doing everything. It was me. I'm the one that went to college. I'm the one that got the degree. I'm the one that got the career going. I'm the one that got the job. And then later in life, as life changes, I've started to reflect on a lot of things and started to realize, wait a minute, there was something else involved here. It wasn't all me. It couldn't have been because the way my mind was working and all the issues I was having. And one of the other things I thought was interesting was seeing how not only are there 9 types, but how the types are broken into the triads and how those triads.
I was going to lead into that.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what I was wanting to go through because there's a body part that's connected to that.
Right. And there's an emotion that's related, and that it feeds into this idea of the weaknesses as well. So when you look at the triads on the Enneagram, there's 3. There's the gut triad, those are the 8s, 9s, and 1s, the heart triad, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and the head triad, 5, 6, and 7. The gut people, the emotion would be anger. So the 8s are externalizing that. That's why they can be very confrontational and intense. Mm-hmm. The 9s try to forget the anger that can kind of control them, and they do that by often procrastinating and not recognizing reality and sort of being very laid back. And 1s tend to internalize that, and it can become what 1s often are called like the highest self-critics, where they're never good enough.
Yep.
Heart people, 2s, 3s, and 4s, they're just driven by the heart, by the feelings, and 2s focus outwardly. So they're wonderful people because they're very aware of others' emotional states and physical states, maybe not always aware, though, of their need for help. 3s, and this was enlightening for me, have very much trouble recognizing their own feelings. And I would say that is true. I can't always verbalize, what I'm feeling. I tend to be more thinker and goal setter, and I don't want to always take time to really contemplate what am I feeling, until it kind of explodes. So that was really enlightening to learn that I tend to not want to recognize my feelings. Mm-hmm. And then 4s concentrate inwardly on their own feelings. And that's why they're such amazing creative people, because they have the ability to really internalize their heart issues and then let it come out in their artistic work. Head people, 5, 6, and 7, their emotion would be fear. 5s tend to externalize it. And sixes internalize it, and they're the worst case scenario people, right? So they're always planning ahead for what could happen, but unfortunately, they always think the worst, right? So they're internalizing those fears, but they can be very, very loyal people too, and very prepared. And then sevens tend to try to forget it, and that I didn't mention this yet, but sevens are the most common addicts in the world because that when they're high, but when they're low, and they don't want to not have unstimulating, unfun experiences. So the emotions really do play a lot into our Enneagram number.
That's really interesting. So I know people can't really visualize the Enneagram right now, but how do the connecting lines come into this?
Connecting lines are about who we are when we're, in our integrated self. Then you look at what from your number, where you go to another number for integration. Whereas when you are like I talked about in a pandemic and stressed and feeling fragmented and disoriented, from your number, you go to a different number and you take on the weaknesses of that number versus the strengths when you are whole and integrated. So for me as a 3, when you look at the Enneagram, you have to Google it and look at the connecting lines. The 3 goes to the 9 in weakness. So I tend to want to pull back and not be as proactive as I am and, kind of let go of things. Whereas when I'm operating in a whole true self, united with my spirit, with God, and really functioning at my highest level, I tend to have the best parts of the 6, the strengths of the 6, productive and logical, very organized thoughts, able to really set, goals that can achieve a lot for the common good. So it really, this is the depth of the Enneagram, is it can tell you how you change and morph when you have stressors come on you or when you're actually operating in a very holistic way.
That's just amazing to me. It's so interesting. And even as you describe that, I can't help but to think personality and my highs and lows and how I reacted. And now I can see, reflecting on it, it makes so much more sense now. Instead of having something happen and sitting back and going, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I not do this instead? And it has been helpful for me with the caregiving process in itself. And so I know what I'm capable of, what I would like things to be. And it's like I give myself that pep talk. Okay, this, especially if we have to go to the doctor's office and there's certain ways I want things to happen. It's like I have to tell myself, okay, this is the likely scenario. This can go this way or it can go that way. There's nothing here that can be perfect. And afterwards, when it's all said and done, it's like, yay, it's exciting. And I go from this high that everything was wonderful. We didn't have a meltdown. We didn't have these other reactions. And so I go through this romantic, enthusiastic, because for me, from the perfectionist, I'm the highs and lows. I'm between the 4 romantic and the 7 enthusiast. And now it makes so much sense to me of why I fluctuate with emotions. It's not just me being the female hormonal. It's a personality type, Yeah,
a lot of it does go back to how we're created and wired and how that gets expressed throughout our life and changed. And I think one thing I would like to share with everybody, because there could be a lot of caregivers, is some more information about the type 2, if that's okay, Jessica.
Absolutely.
I told you that the basic need is, to want to help others. I mean, always looking around for how can I give of myself to meet the physical, emotional, spiritual needs of those around me. And so they're wonderful friends and caregivers because they're so attentive and willing to help. They do, unfortunately, though, sometimes repress their own negative emotions or channel them to try to make them seem perceived as desirable when actually there's a lot going on underneath the surface that they're not revealing. That they probably do need some of their own self-care, attention, and time. So the basic fear of 2s is they may believe that they're only loved because they serve, right? Oh. Whereas Christians, we believe that we're loved first, and out of that love we serve. Sometimes when 2s are not operating in their best self, but in their weakness, they're trying to earn the approval, affection of others by serving. And that's the only way that love is achieved. So that would be a basic fear of twos. Other weaknesses would be, and this, I have felt this with my mom at times. So maybe people who are living with a caregiver can relate this. They can be perceived twos as overbearing, right? Like always offering in advice of how to help, how to improve things. So maybe backing off as a caregiver at times and giving some space and breathing room would be really helpful. Twos can have difficulty recognizing their own needs and expressing them. They can be easily offended by criticism. So some growth opportunities for twos would be to remember their own personal needs, learn to accept help from others. That's a big one, right? Not be prideful. Right. Because the downfall of twos is pride. That's their weakness. So learning how to accept help from others, and that their value does not lie in what they do, and this is hard for everybody, but twos and threes especially, not what they do, but who they are. And then out of who they are, they give, and that help is recognized as a gift. And then they, working through these negative, like repressed emotions of, all I do is give, and I never receive, and I'm tired of it. So working through that to have some self-care. So, I think that a lot of people could be a type 2 who are listening to the show. So it would behoove them to learn more about the strengths and the weaknesses, the connecting lines and the wing numbers of the two, which would be the 3 and the 1. So that's the caregiver in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yes. And that's interesting because you see that they are coming forward with their best interest, but even their own best interest it's like that double-edged sword.
Yes.
So going with this compass, it becomes this internal compass of learning where your balances are to find that true self and understand and recognize when you're in false self to keep yourself, because none of us really stay in. I mean, I think even though now I recognize who my false sense was before and that I'm on the road to getting closer to who my true self is, I still feel the day-to-days or the moment-to-moment where I fluctuate between that true and false, depending on
absolutely
stress. So,
but the beauty of the Enneagram is that it brings to the surface, brings to the forefront of your mind this awareness of, I am driven by this, but I tend to be the best version of this when I'm integrated and not when I'm stressed out. And so you can recognize in yourself where you are and how you can change and grow.
And that change is possible. So it's not so much that you're going to one day, like I'm not going to someday go from a 1 and completely be a 4. It's learning that I can change and become better and be closer to God in that process and not deny those changes.
It really has been freeing for me. I'm not saying this is any replacement for your own spiritual growth, reading God's word, being in small group, going to church. And other personality tests are valid as well. But for me, it has given me a new layer of insight into I can try to be something that I'm not as a 3 and try to, please the world's standards and all of that. And I'm built for that. I'm good at that, in my 20s and everything. But as I've grown now in my 30s, I've become aware that actually who I really am is better than that because it's made by God. My image is not tied to what I do, but who I am. And I can really be more authentic and vulnerable with people. And that's attractive to people because I'm being my true self. Right. So it's very freeing to know that the image of God in me and who I'm becoming, and not just what I do and manufacture, but who I'm becoming is even a better, part of me. So I walk in that freedom of I can be an authentic, vulnerable person that doesn't have to create her own identity, but can live fully as a child of God. And it just really has given me that sense of freedom.
And I love that sense of freedom because now I feel like I'm not bound by the image of who I think I should be. I'm released into the image of who I know I was created to be.
Yes.
It makes a huge difference. So then as people are able to go through and figure out who they are and what type they are, the self-preservation, their sexual instincts, their social instincts, all of this, how it falls into, or not falls into, but it creates their own personal, I guess, internal roadmap of personalities. I mean, how can you actually take this and, I guess, teach it towards our children, our growing? Because I feel like our kids are our cultural shift. They're going to be the ones to change. How would we be able to recognize this in our children, or even teach something like this towards them learning?
You probably can't diagnose too early. Like my 3-year-old's probably too soon. I've heard, starting around 8, 9, 10, you can actually let them take the test and talk it over with them, and you can read the book together. But to validate, like, I see this in you or I don't see this in you. But letting them go on their own path of interrogation as well, exploring those depths, and then being there to mirror it to them and show them, yeah, I think that could be you. And so you can help them then lean into the gifts that they've been given, the strengths, and help them try to avoid those traps along the roadmap of the weaknesses and the false self.
Right. And especially falling into other types of peer pressures.
It helps in every respect, every relationship, from children to spouse to caregiving. And those are just personal, but also even business relationship work. It's very much involved in leadership, hiring, training, because you are really doing what's called emotional intelligence building. So you're becoming intrapersonally intelligent, so self-aware, internally aware of who you were created to be and how you can be the best version of yourself. But you're also doing interpersonal intelligence. So you are becoming aware of those people, in your environment, work, home, etc., that they are different from you. And it really does help you have the ability to have perspective and empathy and communicate to that person instead of trying to get them to understand you. So you can become aware of how to know them and reach them at their level.
And that's pretty much what caregiving ends up doing. The demands of caregiving, you have to find that happy medium where you come from a place of love and compassion and become that genuine helper and reach them on the level that they're on, regardless what it is.
I would say that's the greatest gift. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The greatest gift of the Enneagram is that newfound compassion that you have, not just for yourself, but for others.
Absolutely.
It really has been transformative in some of my relationships.
Definitely. I have to agree. Well, thank you so much for coming on and explaining this to me, because it has really turned into a positive tool for me to take a different perspective in life, and especially in my caregiving journey.
You're so welcome. Thank you for asking me on the show.
So I hope this gave you more food for thought, everybody. Until next time, be proactive and take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about proactive caregiving and to hear other episodes of this podcast, please visit www.jessicalizelcannon.com. This podcast is produced by Cannon Light Media, LLC, www.cannonlightmedia.com. Music provided by Chris Paradise.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.